Attorney General. I'm joined today by Senator Kauth and Senator Storer. We'll take questions at the end, so if you have questions, and you're not here in person, please text the number that was on the media advisory. Before we start, I actually want to congratulate two former members of the legislature, former Senator Mike Flood and former Senator Adrian Smith, who both went to Mar-a-Lago to visit with President-elect Trump. And they got there by virtue of the leadership roles that they've earned in the U.S. House of Representatives, which I think is such a great reflection of the work that our federal delegation does, but also those two individuals in particular, to be able to earn those leadership spots and be able to go to visit the president-elect, I think is a great compliment to them. And I think for my money, we have the best federal delegation in the state. And I'm very proud that they can call themselves former state senators. They were great senators when they served. I'm surrounded today by two great state senators who have agreed to bring bills that I think are really critical to helping keep Nebraskans safe, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So we have two bills today. I'm going to talk about the first that Senator Kauth is carrying, and then I'm going to talk about the second that Senator Storer is carrying. Senator Kauth is carrying a bill that we think will finally put an end to the synthetic Delta 8 crisis that we have in this state. As you know, last year we brought a bill with Senator Ibaugh giving the legislature an avenue to help finally put an end to this market that's grown and is harming children and teenagers and adults all around the state of Nebraska. We have also started a litigation campaign that is now running for about a year and a half. So what I'd like to do today is, because many of you have heard about that campaign, and what I want to do is refresh for you the harms of synthetic Delta. It's not just synthetic Delta 8, it's Delta 6, Delta 10, all sorts of other chemicals that have never been tested in humans and have demonstrable harms for little children as well as adults. And I also want to update you on our litigation campaign and why it's so important for this bill to pass. So as I've told you before, synthetic Delta 8 is untested and is harmful. In fact, we know that there are reported cases of synthetic Delta 8 causing deaths around the country. It's led to a significant number of people calling into poison control. And we know, anecdotally, from reports around the state, including in Lincoln, that we have had children as young as 2 or 3 who have been hospitalized. We have had high schoolers who have contacted our office. Their families have contacted our office because they've had mental health breaks coming from taking these types of products. Those harms have caused our office to get involved and start a litigation campaign to give the state one avenue to help clean up this particular industry, which is not legal. That litigation campaign has really revealed some startling truths. You may remember when we were here about a little over a year ago, we talked about our investigation in that we found 85% of the products sold and the products that we tested, well over 100, were mislabeled. They had significantly high levels of synthetic Delta 8, upwards of 600, 700, 800 milligrams. And to remind you, as little as 10 milligrams can send a little boy, my son is 6, 10 milligrams could send him to the hospital. We found some of these things which were packaged to be sold and entice children having upwards of 600, 700, or 800 milligrams. We found products that had synthetic Delta 9, which is the psychotropic component of marijuana, in levels that were greater than you could buy in a Denver dispensary. We found all sorts of other chemicals that are not fit for human consumption, including things that we know cause cancer, pesticides, heavy metals, and the like. We have since expanded our litigation and investigation campaign. We've now filed 15 lawsuits. We started at the end of last year a campaign to clean up city by city. We filed suit in Norfolk to actually, we sued every single store in the city of Norfolk. Our investigation there actually showed that the industry is regressing. Instead of 85% being bad, every single product, 100% of the products that we tested in Norfolk were mislabeled. And they had harmful levels of Delta 9, Delta 8, Delta 10, and other inappropriate chemicals that were being sold to people in the city of Norfolk. Our lawsuits we've made a lot of progress. We've reached settlements with about a majority of the defendants that we've sued, covering dozens of stores, but it is not enough. It's not fast enough, and it's not widespread enough, even though we've sued stores all around the state of Nebraska. So 2025 will bring one or two paths. The first path that's open to us, and the path that I think will be a win-win for the state, is Senator Kauth's bill, which will show once and for all that these products are illegal and that they should be taken off the shelves. If that passes, I think it'll do it in a way that won't take a lot of these stores offline, won't put them out of business, and will give them the clarity that they think they need in order to operate within the law. If that doesn't pass, we are going to dramatically increase the scope, size, and speed of our litigation campaign, which will unfortunately cost more taxpayer dollars, take more resources, and unfortunately also will create more pain for the stores themselves. We've worked very hard throughout our litigation campaign to ensure that these stores, the ones that work with us and take products off their shelves, are not subject to the penalties. In some cases, upwards of millions of dollars of penalties that we could recoup, because we have not been trying to take these stores and put them out of business. Unfortunately, not enough stores are doing the right thing, and that will end in 2025. So our hope is that this bill will pass and that we will be able to clean up this industry once and for all this year. With that, I'm going to hand the mic to Senator Kauth, that she can explain in more detail. Senator?
Thank you all for being here. I am very pleased to be able to carry this bill for the Attorney General. This is something that we assume when we go into a store to purchase something, it's going to be safe. We just assume that those products have been vetted somehow. These have never been tested for human consumption. These are things that are out there and being sold and marketed. They're being marketed to kids. They're being marketed to adults as something, hey, you can buy it over the counter. It must be fine. That's not true. This happened because in 2018 we passed a farm bill trying to get our farmers the ability to grow hemp, which is great. We need to be able to do that. This bill actually keeps that in place. We want our farmers to be able to get into that hemp industry and use it for products that don't hurt people. But we need to get rid of these synthetic, and I love to say the word right, cannabinoids. These are hurting people. There are so many ills that come from it. And when the Attorney General talked about poison control, over 10,000 calls to poison control in 3 years. That is 8 or 9 people per day are actually having the wherewithal to call poison control and say, hey, I just took something and something is going real wrong. Who's not calling? How do we even know what's going on? So this bill is going to make those products illegal, synthetic cannabinoids, so that we can actually get a handle on this and make sure that people understand that just because it was in a store at one point in time, it was not good for you. We saw this with K2. We saw this with bath salts. There will always be kind of this, I've heard it called the whack-a-mole, of bad actors coming up with ways to get around the system. This is the way we think we can best protect the citizens of Nebraska.
Thank you, Senator Kauth. If you hold your questions on the hemp bill to the end, we'll get to that in a second. I couldn't think of a better sponsor, by the way, than Senator Kauth. Senator Kauth is dynamic, she is dogged, she is organized, she has a huge heart for children in vulnerable populations, and I'm very confident with her leadership on the floor of the legislature that this bill will get passed. Turning to the second bill from Senator Stewart, I could not be more grateful for her leadership on this. This is actually going to be, this is a very exciting pilot program that we're proposing to really help on the mental health space. So we know we have a mental health crisis. I think we are constantly hearing from stakeholders all around the state of Nebraska that we don't have enough resources to help manage all of the needs that we have in the mental health space. And I think it's incumbent on us as leaders and public policymakers to look upstream of our mental health crisis and ask, what is causing the mental health crisis, and where are places that we can help those who are trying to respond to it? That's part of the reason why our office has gone after a lot of bad actors that we think are helping to fuel the mental health crisis, including TikTok. As you know, we think that's a driver of mental health issues in youth, especially young girls. We've sued Meta over those types of issues. That's why we are going after synthetic Delta-8 retailers, because we know that has caused mental health issues. Some very sad stories that we have heard. This is the bill that Senator Storr is bringing is less going upstream and more trying to find creative ways to help ease the burden of the mental health crisis on our law enforcement agencies. And what I think this pilot program is a win-win-win. It's a win for the community, it's a win for the agency, and critically, it's actually a win for those who are suffering from the mental health crisis. So what am I talking about, and how did this come to be? Well, we traveled around the state. 2 years ago, I went to every county. I went to 93 counties and met with law enforcement in every one to try to see what the themes were from the various law enforcement agencies. And one of the things that came up from all of them was we are getting, especially the rural ones that have small, you're talking about sheriff's offices that might have two, maybe they have a sheriff and a deputy. They only have 2 people in their agency. One of them was, how do we deal with civil commitments of mental health, people who are suffering mental health breaks? They're not people who have committed crimes, very clear. Not people who have committed a crime and who are going to jail. These are people who could be subject to an emergency order, an EPC, who could be civilly committed somewhere warm, somewhere safe, where they can get medication to help them get through the break before they cause harm to themselves or cause harm to the community. Well, currently, right now, our infrastructure for mental health is not where we would like it to be. There are options for those people who are civilly committed to go get support in our regional hospitals, but the beds are scarce. There aren't that many of them, and they're usually far away. The travel time is pretty significant, and oftentimes these agencies, when a sheriff's deputy or an officer might take the person who's being committed, and they might have to spend hours upon hours upon hours at the hospital. So I have heard personally examples, stories from small agencies where a deputy might travel 4 hours one way, sit there for 12 hours, come back 4 hours to go home, go back, sit for longer, and it's an enormous strain on the agencies, and it's also not good for those who are committed. So what this pilot program would do, it's no general fund dollars, I know it's important to both Senator Storer and I, is to help test and layer on top of an infrastructure that we know that does work. There's a cooperative infrastructure already in place between sheriffs who have jails, as well as other sheriffs and other officers and other law enforcement agencies in the surrounding region. So what we're saying is, we don't want to expand jail cells. These are not people who are being criminally prosecuted, but what we want to do is use that trusted mechanism, the place where we know everyone works really well together, and have some funding for them to try out a program where they could have a safe, warm place where the person who could be committed could go and get some immediate acute care to help them get through their break while the rest of the process plays out, while we wait for maybe a permanent bed or a more long-term bed in the regional hospital, while we can work through with the mental health board, while we can get them in a good place. And we think this pilot program will help alleviate the strain on our law enforcement agencies. We think it'll help our communities because more people who need care will get the care, and before they actually harm themselves or others. We also think it's good for those who would be civilly committed, because in many of those cases, because of the strain on resources, there just aren't enough people enough agency personnel to be able to really help those people. And so you're seeing people who are not being committed or not getting the care, then becoming danger to themselves or to others. So we think this is a win-win-win. And with that, I'll hand it off to our champion, Senator Storer.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney General. I am very pleased to introduce this bill. A little bit of background: I served as a county commissioner in Cherry County, the largest county in the state, and as a result, I also served on Region 4 Behavioral Health Board. And so I got to see a lot of the problems firsthand. In fact, just yesterday, I got an email from a constituent out in Dawes County expressing concern, unbeknownst that I would be introducing this bill, but expressing concern exactly the problem that we're trying to solve here. So it's a very, very real problem. Again, it's a pilot program that we're hoping catches on, that we're going to be able to take that model and move that forward. You know, I represent a district that deeply understands the challenges that we face addressing mental health crisis, and I think we would all agree that we are in a mental health crisis in our state. And the lack of mental health resources, again, as the Attorney General mentioned, long distances to care. Oftentimes, again, for the Sheriff's Department in Cherry County, it would be over a 2-hour drive to the nearest regional facility, assuming a bed would be available when they get there. So when an individual requires emergency protective custody for their safety, law enforcement has to face that long drive to take them to that appropriate facility. This is going to help bridge the gap. This is going to help find a facility closer. This is going to take the burden off of our small local law enforcement agencies, and first and foremost put the individual in need of care as a priority, and finding a safe place for them. So I want to express my deep gratitude to the Attorney General for his leadership and support in addressing this issue, particularly important to rural Nebraska. This bill represents a significant step forward to help our communities like mine, to create a pilot program that will, I'm confident, be a model moving forward and be a positive example of how we can address the mental health crisis and access to care without general fund dollars. So this will, we're looking at grant money for the first pilot program. So thank you. I appreciate your leadership.
Thank you, Senator. Before we take questions, let me say I could not think of a better champion for this particular bill than Senator Storer. deep roots in Western Nebraska, deep relationships with the people who are most impacted, both the individuals but also the agencies themselves, and given her time as a county commissioner, this type of a bill really requires someone who has knowledge of the infrastructure that exists and what is working and what is not working as well, because we think this pilot program is going to work, but we want to be able to tweak it before we think it's going to be successful, but there will probably need to be some tweaks as we look to scale it statewide. And so for us to have her leadership and knowledge and expertise carrying it on the floor, I think will make it a great success. With that, I'm happy to take any questions. I'll keep you questions. If you have any questions for the senators, I'll hand it off. So, Andrew.
Just to be clear, this pilot program is to jail folks who have not been
No.
accused of crime?
No. That's the opposite of what I said. I said it's not.
Where are you housing them in?
It depends on where. So, for instance, in Scottsbluff County, it depends on where the location would be. It'll be a secure facility that will be where it will be a safe, warm bed. In Scottsbluff County, they have a place that is not as a part of the jail facility. It's actually, they have an old mothballed juvenile justice facility that used to house juveniles that is not housing anyone. They think that's if Scottsbluff is the ultimate location, that's a place where potentially we could, if they get the location, if they are the pilot program, that would be a potential location. But it could be adjacent to a jail. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but it is not a jail cell. They are not under arrest. In rural, Douglas County is one thing. They might have, Lancaster County, Douglas County have the luxury of having multiple buildings for lots of different needs. County courthouses and smaller communities don't have that luxury. And so, yes, could it be adjacent to a jail or part of a jail building? Yes, but to be very clear, Andrew, it is not. These are not jail cells. These are not jails. These are for people who haven't committed crimes.
So what is it, like pull up a trailer outside of the sheriff's office or outside of the
Okay.
jail? And
No.
make that the secure, warm place? I mean,
No, why would you think that, Fred?
well, it's
I said it was
adjacent to a jail. What does that mean?
Well, it could be in a separate building. It could be part of a jail facility adjacent to the jail. It could be a different part of the building.
Offices, unused offices or something?
It depends on the location, potentially. I mean, there are county courthouses that have grandfathered jail facilities that are part of their county courthouse. So not far from where county officials work, where people come and maybe register to vote. It's Cherry County. So the idea of having one building where you might have in one corner some jail cells, and adjacent to that area some corner where you've got someone who's doing their county business to come to pay their registration fees, and some other corner where you are able to civilly commit people and give that for a short period of time and give them a warm place to have a good meal and to get some help. That is not unusual out in Western Nebraska. The idea of that is not. Do you have anything to add to that, Senator Story?
Yeah, I mean, I would say just exactly that, and use Cherry County as an example. It's a beautiful, brand new, we call it the Justice Center, but it encompasses the court offices. It has some of the courthouse offices, the treasurer, the clerk, the county commissioners meet under that roof. It also has the courtroom, and the jail cells are within that same building. So it's all in one unit. But the intent here certainly. This is very clear, they would not be put in a jail cell, but there may be a space available within that entire unit. Again, as Attorney General Hilgers said, in our smaller communities in particular, facilities look a little different than they might in Douglas or Lancaster County.
So it's a pilot program, but we don't know where the pilot is going to be? Is that what we're saying? Is it going to be one county? Can you give us some teeth on the pilot program?
Yeah.
Also the funding, you said there's no general fund.
Yeah. Great question. So Cindy asked, I'm sorry I didn't repeat the questions over here. I apologize. Cindy asked, can I give some more detail as to where it might be and also the funding? So I'll take the second question first. Funding, we think there's at least two routes. We've communicated with the Crime Commission. We think that there's probably some grant funding for this. We also think that this could be a place where the opioid fund, we could utilize dollars from the opioid fund. Those are two particular non-general fund sources of revenue that we think either of those would potentially work, Cindy. The location the pilot program, the location of the pilot program, I think it will be in a rural community. It won't be near Lancaster or Douglas or Sarpy counties. I think we can say that. I think we want to be flexible to see how the conversation in the legislature goes, and which counties and which sheriffs might have interest in participating. I know there are sheriffs who have raised their hand and said this would be amazing for us in our community. So I think we want to have some flexibility because, to Fred's questions, Maybe there's a place that we know that has a great spot that would cost no money to really rehab to allow for people to be there, that could service and support a lot of really rural communities. That would be perfect. Maybe they'll raise their hand after the committee hearing and say this would be for us. And so we want that process to play out a little bit, but I think you can be confident it will be in a rural area that is at least a couple hours drive from the major metropolitan areas. Because the big thing we're trying to alleviate is this travel time and lack of infrastructure that is really impacting people. Yeah, go ahead,
You
Anthony.
mentioned before travel time in terms of deputies or sheriff or somebody driving with the person and
Yeah.
staying with them, coming back and forth.
Yeah.
Would this still make it so that the deputies or sheriff or somebody would be with them, they just wouldn't have to travel, or would there be a mental health professional that would step in and take over?
Great question from Anthony is, I talked about the travel, so under the current system, under this system, would there still be travel and what would happen to the deputy's time? So a deputy, let's say you take a hypothetical example where someone might have to travel 4-hour drive to go to Norfolk or 3 hours to go to the regional hospital. They might have to drive some to this new pilot program facility, so maybe they have to go an hour or two. We would like to have the pilot program, kind of to Cindy's question, we're evaluating everything. We like to have the participants within, say, an under 2-hour drive. That's a variable for us to consider as we move forward. They would still have the drive time. It's not really the drive time. It's the predictability and certainty of having a bed and having the ability to drop someone off and not have to stay there. And what we found, the reason why we're layering it over the current sort of sheriff infrastructure is that if you go out west and you talk to sheriffs, no matter where they are, they will tell you either that if they have a jail or facility, they have amazing relationships with the surrounding county sheriffs who don't have jail facilities, because they do this all the time. Not every county has most counties don't have jails. So where do you go when you take someone? You have an agreement with another county. The trusted relationship between county attorneys, county sheriffs, either the county sheriffs who also has a jail will say, I treat everyone fairly, or you talk to the other sheriffs and they'll say, yeah, absolutely. Sheriff Overman is great. I know I can trust what I'm hearing from them, and I know I can have a spot for the people that I'm either incarcerating in the current case or in this case civilly commit. So yeah, there will still be some drive time. It won't alleviate that, but it's not really, it's like the uncertainty, it's the timing, it's the ability to know that they can drop someone off, they'll be secure, safe, have a warm place to be. I think that's really the key time savings and burden saving from a lot of these agencies. Yes, Andrew in the back.
How will these places be staffed, and what would the qualifications be for those people?
That's a good question. I think that we'll let the hearing. So the question is, how will they be staffed? I think we want to be able to leverage current staffing in a lot of these places. Certainly, one thing that we're looking at in the pilot program, because we want to be able to give people get the medication. So you want someone who can diagnose and prescribe meds. I mean, that's one of the ways that this is a win-win-win, is to help provide a win to the person who's being committed. We want to give them treatment. So some places, like say Scottsbluff, might, again, another variable to Cindy's question, some places have that kind of medical staff where you can actually, they have them already on staff. So we'd like to be able to leverage those people. One question is if it makes sense to have a place where they don't, maybe have that same kind of full-time staffing. Do we try to have a telemedicine component of some kind? Do we try to leverage medical staff in other communities? I think that is a question that remains to be seen, but I think the goal is for the pilot to leverage existing resources to kind of keep our fiscal footprint as small as possible so we can understand what works, what doesn't, and what variables we need to tweak as we hopefully roll this out on a larger basis. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew. Go.
Is this meant to be a go-between facility between, I guess, the civil commitment? Is the goal to get them into one of these behavioral centers?
Yes.
The hospital
Oh.
mentioned? And is there a time limit? I mean, is there any kind of component to make sure that, I guess, police aren't housing folks in these facilities for weeks or months on end?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the question is the goal to get, two questions, is the goal to get these people into a full-time facility of some kind, and is there a time limit? Yes, there is a time limit. There are restrictions. You can't just civilly commit someone for weeks on end. I think generally it's around 72 hours, Andrew. I would say, by the way, if any Nebraskan has any concern about that, I mean, go out in western Nebraska and talk to these law enforcement agents. I mean, they see the same people, and they can name you the half dozen people who are having problems, who are harm to themselves, who maybe their lives have spiraled out of control. They want to find ways to help the people. This isn't about just locking people up. They're not locking up people at all. So they're not putting them in jail, they're helping them. So this would be the bridge. The really acute issue is getting someone off the street, somewhere safe where they can sort of stabilize, and then get them into long-term care. And that's the issue that we have right now is we're going to the more long-term care facilities in the stabilization phase, and that is just too unpredictable, and there's just not enough beds and not enough resources. The number I heard, which I've heard this, and I haven't independently verified, but I've heard that there are fewer than 100 mental health beds in the entire state of Nebraska through the regional center, or the behavioral center. So this is to help in that acute zone. Cindy, did you have a question?
It was that, what happens to the people when they're in there and for how long? So they would get medical treatment, you say, I mean, but there's no price tag on this at this point, because that seems like it might be a little costly.
But for telehealth, I mean, the bill provides specifically for telehealth for that reason.
Do you want to answer? Go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah, I think to address a couple of those questions, the bill specifically provides for telemedicine, telehealth, which makes a lot of sense in our rural communities, obviously. And also, to help people understand, for a lot of the counties in the state of Nebraska, they may only have a sheriff and a deputy sheriff. They may have two people on their law enforcement in that county. So when you take one out for 6 or 12 or 24 hours, that's really putting the community at risk as well, with only one law enforcement officer left there. So, this is a beautiful concept to solve a variety of problems. First and foremost, to get care for that patient or that individual first.
One second. Hey, Andrew, before I go to you, I want to add one more thing to my answer to Andrew's question about this putting people in jail. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, this is something that is going to help keep people out of jail. If you look at the numbers in our corrections system, it is essentially a mental health ward in and of itself. There are a tremendous number of people who have mental health issues. And these agencies are so small, to Senator Storr's point, that if they can't feel like they can handle it, and they have a recruitment crisis of their own, if they feel like they can't handle these people don't get civilly committed and they don't get stabilized, they haven't committed crimes yet. And if they don't get help, you know what often happens is they do commit crimes. And so if we want to get upstream of having people having mental health issues actually causing crime and then going into our correction system, this is exactly the type of intervention that we should be thinking about doing. So this is the opposite. This is trying to make sure that people do not go to jail. So I want to emphasize that. Go ahead, Andrew.
If this place is not a licensed, facility, I mean, is it a liability concern about, dropping somebody off at someplace like this? And who has liability on these commitments?
Yes, the question is do you have to think about like liability and who has the liability, and is that an issue that we have to consider for these facilities? Certainly, that is one of the issues that we absolutely have to consider. I think in general, a county sheriff, for instance, if they have someone, they're insured for what happens on their watch for anyone that they hold, and so anyone who is, whether it's criminally or civilly committing somebody, they have responsibility ultimately. Liability, responsibility. So we're going to work with an agency that will feel comfortable taking on. I think it's incremental. It's not, we're not talking about hundreds of people or even maybe dozens of people. We're talking about a small number of people. But yeah, there of course, just like any other unit of government, if you're housing somebody, you do take on some additional liability. This is not costless, to be clear, kind of to Cindy's point too. This is not costless. We do think there will be some incremental costs with the telemedicine, maybe some personnel, maybe some additional liability insurance, but we think we've got sources of revenue that are not, or sources of dollars that are not general funds. Yeah, Andrew.
Because how do you risk creating a bottleneck if part of your concerns are the travel and then also just the lack of availability of beds? How is that remedied in 72 hours in one of these facilities? I mean, isn't ultimately at the end of that, there's still the same travel time to regional centers, and there's still...
No, it's a great question. Andrew's question is, hey, are you really alleviating the problem if all you're doing, this is my words, paraphrase, you're just shifting it 72 hours. Fair. The reality is you cannot, no, the answer is it does not work that way. And the reason is because when you pick up, you don't get to schedule when you're going to civilly commit somebody. That happens at 3 a.m, it might happen at 2 p.m, it might happen at the gas station, it might happen at the church. Like, you don't get to plan that out. And this isn't at the end, we're just going to hold them for 72 hours and we can't do anything with them, and then at the end of 72 hours we can hand it off. This is, you have up to 3 days, plus or minus, to be able to figure out how to get get them that actual longer term care. Now maybe that's in 6 hours. Maybe that's in 12 hours, and maybe you can deliver them. And by the way, one of the reasons why people have to stay so long, the agencies have to stay so long at the behavioral health centers, the hospitals, is because a lot of times they are concerned that they're dropping someone off who hasn't stabilized yet. And they're like, we're fearful that this is going to create a problem, so we need your help, your security, your presence here to help support us. But if you can get them somewhere where they're stabilized, it's more likely they can get a bed opened and drop them off when it makes sense, and that person is stable, is not a risk to themselves or others, and it's less likely that they're going to need the law enforcement personnel to keep everyone safe. So, go ahead, Senator Storr, please.
To add to what you're saying is just the reality is right now, oftentimes where they're waiting for that bed to open up is a waiting room. That is not comfortable, that is not private. They have delayed access to medical care. So this is really expediting their ability to get access to care, even if that's telemedicine initially, and have a private place to sort of decompress and be safe, rather than this public waiting room that could be hours, quite frankly.
That's great. Well, thank you, Senator Storr. Other questions?
But during that
sorry.
time, just one more for clarity, but during that time when they're in the layover facility, they're being held there. They can't just leave.
Yeah, they're being civilly committed. It's called an EPC. I mean, there are certain rights for law enforcement to be able to, under the law, it's consistent with due process. This is something that's been constitutionally tested. So this is not, so we're building off of a concept that's been around for a long time. We're not adding some new process where they can be retained longer, detained for, we're going off the same process where they can, yes, they are being detained. I mean, it's a civil commitment. Same standards. We're not strengthening or loosening those standards. Do you have a question for Ed?
Another subject.
If Senator Kauth is here. I know she'd be willing to answer.
The governor's budget proposal
Yes.
takes $65 million away from Star Wars projects and the last $6 million away from the lake between Lake and
Yeah.
Omaha. As the lead sponsor of those projects, what is your reaction?
The budget-making process and the determination to help do projects or not do projects, whether transformational or otherwise, is within the hands of the governor and the legislature. I'm no longer in the legislature. I'm a former senator, so I don't have any comment on that. Now, if someone wants to sue somebody or be sued, then that's a joke. Come on. Then maybe. No, I don't have any comment on that. Yeah, Andrew.
On the THC stuff, and you tried this last year, is there anything different in Senator Kauth's bill compared to Senator Ibach's bill last year?
Oh, that's a great question. So the question is there anything different from last year to this year? The core is similar. The core is more or less the same. There is at least one major component that's no longer in this bill because it passed last year, which is, if you might remember, Senator Ibach, a portion of that bill did pass, which is to take the regulatory component out of the state back and put it into the feds. But the core component is to ensure that synthetic THC is properly prohibited. Do you have anything to add to that, Senator Kauth?
Yes, thank you. To make sure that it's properly prohibited while also maintaining the rights of the farmers, because we do have farmers who have gotten involved in the hemp farming, and we want to make sure that their rights, their work that they've gone through is maintained and protected.
Have these bills been introduced and what are their numbers?
I just dropped it this morning, and I don't know the number yet.
Mine will be dropped this morning.
Telling you, so organized. Yes, Andrew. Oh, and then I'll go to Anthony. Oh, Anthony, go ahead.
All right, so for the THC and double A, double 9 bills, you're going to be obviously trying to take these off the market here in Nebraska. What effect do you think that will have on the stores that are really kind of marketing that they sell these products? Will that really affect them? Will they go out of business? Are you hoping to go out of business? Like, what are you hoping?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Anthony's question is, what will be the impact of the bill passing on the stores? Well, the bill, I'll say if the bill passes, it will be a dramatically different impact if we have to sue people this year. Last year and the year before, when we sued people, we told them, hey, look, if you're going to play ball with us and get them off the shelves, we're not trying to put you out of business. We'll waive penalties. That's what we've done. And all the settlements that we have that have impacted several dozen stores, we have waived penalties. That is off the table. If we have to sue anyone moving forward, we're going to seek maximum penalties to the full extent of the law, because we would have expected by now people would do the right thing. The idea that people are selling gummies with Delta 9 concentrations close to 2% is outrageous. The fact that people are selling Delta 8, things with synthetic Delta 8 that have 700 or 800 milligrams is outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. And to my view, if we have to sue them as an office, we were no longer going to, they are not good faith players, we're no longer going to waive penalties, and we will go after them to the fullest extent of the law. Now, if the bill passes, it's actually, and I'm not trying to put people out of business, but they will have to account for the harm that they've caused in Nebraska. Now, if the bill passes, it's actually probably better for them, because it'll allow them some time. It will allow them to take the products off the shelves. It would likely not require us to sue, I would hope, us to not actually sue anyone who is running afoul of Senator Kauth's law. So I think that bill is better. I mean, my goal is not to shut down businesses, but honestly, if they're going to poison communities, I think you have to. They took a gamble, they took a risk, and if we have to sue them, that's going to be we're going to go after them. Andrew,
you kind of maintained last year that you felt like all of this was already illegal. Here you are again asking the legislature to outlaw it.
Yeah.
If this passes, are you going to stop the civil suits and try and...
That's a great question. The question, and I'm going to quote it, was, I kind of maintain that they're illegal. Just to clarify, they are illegal. I didn't kind of. They are, I did, I do think that, and they are illegal. It's such a unique scenario, Andrew, unlike any that I'm aware of in the state history, frankly around the country, because every other state has been dealing with this, where you have had something where no one, and I voted for that bill, we absolutely were like legalizing synthetic Delta 8. No one thought that. The federal government didn't think that. The people who passed the Farm Bill didn't think that. Other states didn't think that. And overnight, you had this dramatic industry statewide that just sort of popped up over like 2 or 3 years, where people are in legitimate strip malls or legitimate retail sellers, like working with banks and other, selling lots of different products, and it just happened so fast, and so that our normal tools just didn't apply the same way. And so we either have the law that Senator Kauth is bringing, that I'm hopeful will be passed, in which case, if that passes, I don't think we'll have to sue anybody. But we will. If that passes and people still aren't doing the right thing, then we're dealing with even a different set of circumstances. But we're still willing to sue to enforce the law if they're not going to follow it.
Will you become willing to prosecute people criminally if this law is on the books?
I think it would change. We are willing to prosecute people criminally. What I've said in the past, Andrew, is just that it's not the right tool to attack this industry at scale. We have impacted dozens of stores already getting these products off the market, and we would not have been able to do that, I think, using the criminal means. We're always willing to do that, and if people are flouting the law that Senator Kauth is going to get passed, I think it does change the game a little bit. Suzanne, I'm sorry, do we have people on the phone with questions? Oh, they need to get back. Andrew, with one more question.
Illegal, why don't you just go and raise these stores?
The question from Andrew is, if it's illegal, why don't you go raid these stores? Unfortunately, it's just, that's just not how. That's not really how the tool we have chosen, and it's not. I think that's not the tool that's available to us the same way. We've chosen it, right or wrong, and you know what? Nebraskans can judge whether we've done the right thing or not. I feel very confident that we're standing on solid ground and we're doing the right thing by Nebraska families by choosing the consumer protection tool. It is the tool that gets us the most bang for our buck. Now, I will say this, Andrew, as this unfolds into 2025, given the number of stores that are not apparently doing the right thing, we are going to escalate. We're going to see what happens with this bill, but we have plans in place to accelerate and escalate and broaden our litigation fight. And who knows, maybe you'll see that. But it's not about raids, it's about getting things off the market, and we think we picked the right tool to do that.
And as we move through medical marijuana, which dispensaries are going to be doing that? Should any companies be allowed to do medical marijuana dispensaries?
So the question from Andrew is, if with medical marijuana, should these companies be allowed to be dispensaries? Is that the question? First, I would point out, by the way, every state that has passed, well, I shouldn't say every, but some significant states who have passed marijuana actually have prohibited the synthetic Delta, the THC. So Colorado, which is like what everyone thinks of about legalizing marijuana, they've banned it. Oregon, which up till this year or last year allowed everything, They actually banned Delta 9, which I think should put the question in our mind for all Nebraskans. If Oregon and Colorado are banning Delta 9 THC or synthetic THCs, why is Nebraska allowing this to be sold? To your second question, it has been my view from a policy perspective, and it certainly is my view legally, that I do not think that one can actually sell marijuana legally, given the supremacy clause and what's going on at the federal government. But I don't think those two things are necessarily intersected.
So why don't you just ban Delta 9 some of these products as opposed to, is this what you're doing now by ban?
This would be
like a Colorado ban, what Oregon?
It would be, so the question is this similar to what the other, this is a similar, I don't know if it's exactly worded the same way, Andrew, I doubt that it is, but we have in fact, Josh Selthelson on our team is an amazing lawyer, he's been thinking about these issues for a long time. I think our language probably pulls the best parts from all the various different states, but it's unique to Nebraska. I think it would be similar, which is all the synthetic Delta 8, all the synthetic Delta 9, synthetic Delta 10, all this stuff that's complete nonsense. We're making clear to everyone that it's illegal.